What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to do my official predictions for UFC 305 and do 4 fights on the main card, starting with Tuivasa versus Dricus Rozenstruik, then go to Gamrot versus Dan Hooker, then hit the co-main event of Kai Kara France versus Steve Erceg, and finally top it off with the main event that everyone has been looking forward to, that being Israel the Adesanya, the last stylebender, fighting Dricus Du Plessis in the main event, and one of the most anticipated fights the UFC has ever seen in the Battle of Africa. If you guys enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. That is the best way to show support to the channel. Also, please go down there and leave a comment. And please leave a like on the video. That is also a great way to show support. But let's jump right into my official UFC 305 breakdown. The first fight that I want to start with is the Tuivasa versus Dricus Rozenstruik heavyweight fight on the card. We all know that Tuivasa is coming off 4 straight losses. If I had to, Cyril Gane, Sergey Pavlovich, Alexander Volkov, and Marcin Tybura. 4 straight losses for Tuivasa after he beat Derek Lewis in a 271 victory for him. And Dricus Rozenstruik is coming off a win and a loss after he beat Shamil Gaziev at a main event in March and lost prior to Jailton Almeida by getting rear naked choked. But who do I think is going to win this fight? And I actually think that Dricus Rozenstruik is going to go in there and beat up on Tuivasa. We all know that these guys are some absolute power punchers, and I do not see this fight going to the distance. Tuivasa is an absolute brawler in there, but I do think that Dricus Rozenstruik is going to go in there and show Tuivasa who is boss in this fight. I'm a big Dricus Rozenstruik fan, and I do think that he's got a lot of upside in this fight. He's got a longer reach. He's got a little bit less of a significant strikes landed per minute, but I do think he's just a lot more cognizant of his surrounding area than someone like Tuivasa. Now, Tuivasa's got a chin on him, but I think that Dricus Rozenstruik is going to be able to go in there and do what he needs to get this win. And I do think that even him being a little bit older, I think is going to really aid him in this fight a little tiny bit. I don't think the age is going to do a lot, but he's going to have that a little extra experience by fighting some of the best heavyweights in the world. Now fighting Tuivasa in an absolute brawl in this one, and I do see Dricus Rozenstruik coming up on top. Okay, in the featured bout of UFC 305, we have Mateusz the Gamer Gamrot, who is 24-2, fighting Dan the Hangman Hooker, who is 23-12. And the odds are actually super surprising for me on this fight, having Mateusz Gamrot as a minus 350 favorite over someone like Dan Hooker, because I actually got Dan Hooker winning this fight. I'm a massive Dan Hooker fan. I think he's got some takedowns. I think he's a really good striker, and I think that length that he possesses is gonna give Mateusz Gamrot some problems. Someone like Jalen Turner, who Dan Hooker was able to go in there and out-brawl, gave Mateusz Gamrot a lot of different problems, and I think that Dan Hooker is going to be able to do the exact same thing. If we compare those two fighters, that fight against Jalen Turner for Dan Hooker was a very close fight, but also that fight for Jalen Turner versus Mateusz Gamrot was a very close fight. But I do think that Dan Hooker is just absolute nature to go in there and brawl. He is one of the best just street fighters inside the UFC, and I do think that he's going to have an advantage over someone like Mateusz Gamrot. Now, as we all know, Gamrot kind of spams takedowns, and that's going to be something that really is Dan Hooker's going to have to watch out. He cannot go to the ground against someone like Mateusz Gamrot, but I do think that Dan Hooker is going to be able to avoid the takedowns and truly just stand on the feet and show his striking ability here, which is going to be something monumental for him fighting someone like Mateusz Gamrot. Like I said, I do have Dan Hooker winning this fight. I do think it's a close fight, and I could 100% see Mateusz Gamrot winning. But at the odds of Dan Hooker at a plus 265 currently, I do think that it is a good chance to bet on someone like Dan Hooker, considering that he does have a 4.5-inch reach advantage. He's going to be the taller opponent, and he doesn't really go for takedowns, but I do think Dan Hooker is smart enough to understand the takedown threat from Mateusz Gamrot. Now, it's not like someone like Islam Makhachev, who is really just ground controlling, and someone like that. Mateusz Gamrot just, he just controls. He doesn't go for submissions. He just kind of doesn't do anything, and he got clipped by Rafael dos Anjos. He fought Jalen Turner, which he got clipped. He got bodied by Fiziev in their first round. So I don't think Gamrot has had the greatest success in the UFC, and I think Dan Hooker is going to really show and exploit that. Now, the co-main event is Kai Kara France versus Steve Erceg, and I think that this fight is going to be fight of the night. We got Steve Erceg, who fight Alexandre Pantoja at UFC 301 in the main event, and Kai Kara France, who hasn't fought in a very long time. In his last fight, he fought Amir Albazi, where he lost that fight, but I do think that Kai Kara France should have got the decision victory, and he was supposed to fight Manel Kape at UFC 293 as the same card as Israel Adesanya, but he ended up getting injured prior to that fight camp. But who do I think is going to win this fight? And I do think that Steve Erceg is going to get the win. I think that height advantage is going to be something that is massive for Steve Erceg. I think that fight against Alexandre Pantoja showed of how good Erceg is. I think he should really be the champion. That fight against Pantoja, he put on a lot of different work. He put on a lot of work. He made Pantoja absorb a lot of different damage, and he really showed that he is here to stay in the UFC flyweight division. And I think that Steve Erceg is one of the best flyweights currently, but Kai Kara France is a veteran. I think he 100% has an opportunity to win this fight, but I do think that Steve Erceg is going to go in there and just truly show the MMA community of why he deserves another title shot. And truly, he could get another title shot if he wins this fight over Kai Kara France in dominant fashion. Like I said, I do think that Steve Erceg gets the win. I do think it's going to be a very close fight. I think he gets the win by decision, but I think that this is going to be an absolute dogfight and fight of the night between Kai Kara France and Steve Erceg. And I do think that odds of -160 for Steve Erceg is actually a pretty good bet, where I have Steve Erceg winning this fight. Okay, in the main event, the fight that I have not been able to really put my finger on of who is going to truly win this fight. And as I look at the odds are even. It's Dricus Du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya, and I just made up my mind of who I want to pick. I think Dricus Du Plessis is going to get the job done over Israel Adesanya, and let me tell you why. I think that Dricus Du Plessis has a lot more ways to beat Israel Adesanya than Izzy does Dricus. I think the most dangerous Israel Adesanya is going to be in this fight is in that first round, and I think that Dricus Du Plessis is going to go in there and be able to weather the storm of Israel Adesanya, because it's not that Izzy even hits that hard. I'm not saying he doesn't hit like pillow hands, but I think that Dricus Du Plessis has fought some tougher challenges in this standpoint. Now, I think that this is also going to be one of Dricus' hardest fight. Now, I think that Sean Strickland is a more resilient fighter than Adesanya, but I do think that in that first round, Adesanya is going to have a lot of confidence going in there, considering he's a counter striker, and he's going to possibly be able to catch Dricus in that wild style. I can 100% see Israel Adesanya winning this fight. I'm not saying he can't, but I just think Dricus Du Plessis can take this fight to the ground. He can possibly do some work in the stand-up. He's got the blitz. He can take Izzy down. He could submit Izzy. There's just so many different factors that Dricus Du Plessis could enact on Israel Adesanya that I just see Dricus Du Plessis getting a third or fourth round submission on Israel Adesanya. And I do think that either a third or fourth round submission or a decision victory over Israel Adesanya. I think it's going to be very hard for Israel Adesanya to play catch-up against someone like Dricus Du Plessis, because Dricus always has that takedown threat. He always has a chance to go in there and dog walk you, considering that he is one of the strongest middleweights. You look at how he abused Robert Whittaker in there, of how he had an amazing fight with Sean Strickland, and of how he has beat some of the best middleweights on his way up in those two. To now be the champion to fight Israel Adesanya on his home turf is an absolute legacy play, where I do think Dricus Du Plessis can get the job done. Ultimately, like I said, I would not bet on this fight, no matter if the odds switch. If they stay the same, currently they are even -120 to -120, but I think that Dricus Du Plessis does get the job done. I do think, though, it isn't for sure. I think that I 100% see Israel Adesanya winning. The only way that I do see him win, though, is him clipping Dricus in the first or second round, which is 100% a viable option to really be had. But I think the pressure from Dricus Du Plessis, putting him on, and just if we look at the Robert Whittaker fight for Dricus and of how he examined that Jared Cannonier performance, of how he was able to abuse holes, we all know that Dricus Du Plessis look at that Sean Strickland fight to where he exploited all the holes of Israel Adesanya. And I do think Dricus' team, Dricus' corner, and Dricus is able to make adjustments. Dricus' mental fortitude and everything that he possesses is going to be an absolute banger thing for him to really do inside the UFC octagon to beat Israel Adesanya at UFC 305 in that main event, and to be the UFC middleweight champion still. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA, and please let me know what you think about my UFC 305 picks. I have Dricus Rozenstruik, I have Dan Hooker, I have Steve Erceg, and I have Dricus Du Plessis winning these fights. I think it's going to be an absolute banger of a card. I truly think that this could possibly be a very underrated card, considering that Steve Erceg and Kai Kara-France is an amazing fight. Dan Hooker always brings an amazing fight to come watch. And the big boys in Tuivasa versus Rozenstruik is going to be an amazing fight. We got some other people on here like Jack Jenkins, Casey O'Neill, and a bunch of other fighters to where this could possibly be a very, very, very fun card to watch. But I do think that Dricus Du Plessis will beat Israel Adesanya in the main event to keep his middleweight title still in South Africa and be the true African champion. But that is just my opinion and not a fact. But if you guys enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And please go down there and hit that subscribe button so you guys can help me reach 1,000 subscribers. That would be absolutely amazing. And please, while you're down there, leave a like and comment. I try to respond to as many comments as humanly possible. And I love hearing what you guys have to say, different takes, and a lot of other different stuff. But thank you guys so much for watching this video and my official UFC 305 predictions and breakdowns, and I will see you guys very soon with more UFC content and news.